Brave New World, Chapter 5. By 8 o'clock, the light was failing. The loudspeakers in the tower of the Stoke Pogus clubhouse began, in more than human tenor, to announce the closing of the courses. Lenina and Henry abandoned their game and walked back towards the club. From the grounds of the internal and external secretion trust came the lowing of those thousands of cattle which provided with their hormones and their milk the raw materials for the great factory at Farnham Royal. An incessant buzzing of helicopters filled the twilight. Every 2.5 minutes, a bell and the screech of whistles announced the departure of one of the light monorail trains which carried the lower caste golfers back from their separate course to the metropolis. Lenina and Henry climbed into their machine and started off. At 800 feet, Henry slowed down the helicopter screws, and they hung for a minute or two, poised above the fading landscape. The forest of Burnham beaches stretched like a great pool of darkness towards the bright shore of the western sky. Crimson at the horizon, the last of the sunset faded, though orange, upwards into yellow, and a pale watery green. Northwards, beyond and above the trees, the internal and external secretion factory glared with a fierce electric brilliance from every window of its 20 stories. Beneath them lay the building of the golf club, the huge lower-cased barracks, and on the other side of a dividing wall, the smaller houses reserved for alpha and beta members. The approaches to the monorail station were black with ant-like pollution of lower-cased activity. From under the glass vault, a lighted train shot out into the open. Following its southeasterly course across the dark plain, their eyes were drawn to the majestic building of the Slough Crematorium. For the safety of night-flying planes, its four tall chimneys were flood-lighted and tipped with crimson danger signals. It was a landmark. Why do the smokestacks have those things like balconies around them? Inquired Lenina. Phosphorus recovery, explained Henry telegraphically. On their way up the chimney, the gases go through four separate treatment P3O5 used to go right out of circulation every time they cremated someone. Now they recover over 98% of it, more than a kilo and a half per adult corpse, which makes the best part of 400 tons of phosphorus every year from England alone. Henry spoke with a happy pride, rejoicing wholeheartedly in the achievement as though it had been his own. Fine to think we can go on being socially useful even after we're dead, making plants grow. Lenina, meanwhile, had turned her eyes away and was looking perpendicularly downwards at the monorail station. Fine, she agreed, but queer that alphas and betas won't make any more plants grow than those nasty little gammas and deltas and epsilons down there. All men are physico-chemically equal, said Henry sententiously. Besides, even epsilons perform indispensable services. Even an epsilon. Lenina suddenly remembered an occasion when, as a little girl at school, she had woken up in the middle of the night and become aware, for the first time, of the whispering that had haunted all her sleeps. She saw again the beam of moonlight, the row of small white beds, heard once more the soft, soft voice that said the words were there, unforgotten, unforgettable, after so many night-long repetitions. Everyone works for everyone else. We can't do it without anyone. Even epsilons are useful. We couldn't do without epsilons. Everyone works for everyone else. We can't do it without anyone. Lenina remembered her first shock of fear and surprise. Her speculations through half a wakeful hour, and then, under the influence of those endless repetitions, the gradual soothing of her mind, the soothing, the smoothing, the stealthy creeping of sleep. I suppose epsilons don't really mind being epsilons, she said aloud. Of course they don't. How can they? They don't know what it's like being anything else. We'd mind, of course, but then we've been differently conditioned. Besides, we start with a different heredity. I'm glad I'm not an epsilon, said Lenina with conviction. And if you were an epsilon, said Henry, your conditioning would have made you no less thankful that you weren't a beta or an alpha. He put his forward propeller into gear and headed the machine towards London. Behind them, in the west, the crimson and orange were almost faded. A dark bank of cloud had crept into the zenith. As they flew over the crematorium, the plane shot upwards on the column of hot air rising above the chimneys, only to fall as suddenly when it passed into the descending chill beyond. What a marvelous switchback! Lenina laughed delightedly, but Henry's tone was almost, for a moment, melancholy. Do you know what that switchback was? He said. It was some human being finally and definitely disappearing, going up in a squirt of hot gas. It would be curious to know who it was, a man or a woman, an alpha or an epsilon. He sighed. Then, in a resolutely cheerful voice, anyhow, he concluded, there's one thing we can be certain of. Whoever he may have been, he was happy when he was alive. Everybody's happy now. Yes, everybody's happy now, echoed Lenina. They had heard the words repeated 150 times every night for 12 years. Landing on the roof at Henry's 40-story apartment house in Westminster, they weren't straight they went straight down to the dining hall. There, in a loud and cheerful company, they see an excellent meal. Soma was served with the coffee. Lenina took two half-gram tablets, and Henry three. At 9:20, they walked across the street to the newly opened Westminster Abbey Cabaret. It was a night almost without clouds, moonless and starry. But of this, on the whole depressing fact, Lenina and Henry were fortunately unaware. The electric sky signs effectively shut off the outer darkness. Calvin Stopes and his 16 saxophonists from the facade of the new abbey, the giant letters invitingly glared, London's finest scent of colour and organ, all the latest synthetic music.